As president of CBS Records for 6 years, Clive J. Davis was as responsible as any one person for what pop music Americans heard. David Winshaw, another former top executive at CBS Records, was charged along with Pat Falcone, an alleged mafia figure, with defrauding CBS of more than $75,000 by setting up phony companies to be paid by CBS. Jonathan Goldstein, the federal attorney in Newark who coordinated the inquiry, said that 19 individuals and 6 corporations were charged with criminal offenses, including income tax evasion, perjury, mail fraud, interstate transportation of stolen property, interstate travel to commit bribery, and the making of illegal payments to radio station personnel.
So there we have Clive Davis, Sean Combs' main business mentor. Clive gave Diddy his first deal when he left Uptown Records and founded Bad.
You got married twice to women, but as you're very honest in the book about, you're bisexual, and you've been involved in 2 lengthy relationships with men, including one now. What has been the reaction to these revelations in the book, and have you been surprised by it?
I've not been surprised, honestly, but firstly, from my family, from my children who've known.
At Arista, and then Arista, see, Clive got kicked out of CBS, Clive got kicked out of Arista later. And then he did J Records, which is the initial of his middle name, and he gave Diddy another deal. I think it was $15 million guaranteed, $50 million. Tutti frutti, good booty. If it don't fit, don't force it. You can grease it. Make it easy. These are the original lyrics of the song, voted as the most influential rock and roll and pop music song of the 20th century by many people. Of course, those lyrics were changed to Tutti Frutti, all Rudy, Tutti Frutti, all Rudy, wop, bop, baloo, bop, bop, bam, boom, Little Richard.
I'm not gay now, but, I was gay all my life. I believe I was one of the first gay people to come out. God let me know that he made Adam be with Eve, not Steve.
We used to be gay.
And openly G-A-Y, Mann in the 50s, which... interesting, you think about America in the 50s being supposedly so conservative, but rock and roll was in a way, it was more radical than hip-hop rising up, because hip-hop was coming after you already had rock and roll happen. You had a music come and change the impact the culture. You had already had that happen once.
Well, I think rock was probably the most important cultural event in the history of America. It was like an earthquake. It just shook the whole country, and it cracked open the shell of what had been society before that, and outswarmed a whole new generation of freaks.
Critic Albert Goldman.
And you turn on those stations, and you hear the same tunes over and over, and everybody walks around a little personalized jukebox, and you hear the same tunes over and over again, and every tune uses the same devices over and over and around and around and around. It's the utmost monotony, but that monotony is reassurance. That monotony means I'm not alone. That monotony means I am understanding everything. I haven't had to have a new thought, which is frightening to me because I'm stupid. That monotony means millions of others are into the same monotony, so we're all into one thing, though I'm out here on the highway alone.
But with the rock and roll thing, it was new, and the music industry became this giant engine of profit.
The current rock music gross is probably over $2 billion. Rock music had become the biggest money tree in the history of entertainment. Rock was only half-jokingly called a basic industry, like steel. Conglomerates moved in to buy record labels. Ralph Gleason.
Rock and roll is box office, and that's why the Straight Life business organization of the entertainment world is involved in rock and roll.
$2 billion. That's $700 million more than the whole movie industry grosses from ticket sales in 1 year. $2 billion. About 3 times the amount of money taken in by all spectator sports, college and professional, including football, baseball, basketball, hockey, and tennis.
So in the aftermath of the Diddy trial, and I know, like, they're talking like he was victorious. I mean, he didn't get to RICO, but he shouldn't have been charged with RICO, at least based on the evidence we saw. But he got convicted for the Mann Act. I mean, he's going to prison for a couple years, and going to prison for a couple years when you've been living the life well, any type of comfortable life, much less the life he's been living. He don't want to do it. So, but it'll be a year he'll have in by the time the sentencing is supposed to be in October. Some people say the guidelines are going to be 2.5. Some say more like 5.25. I tend to think, given because in these pre-sentence reports, they can hold all the things you've been charged with against you, not necessarily in a formal way, but the probation department and the judge can sort of take into consideration whatever they want to. For example, that's why they let defendants get up and speak. I mean, sometimes people talk themselves into a little bit less of a sentence, like they really believe, like, oh, you had a hard life and you're young and you're going to change. And sometimes people talk crazy to judges and get more time. So, given that Diddy, he narrowly avoided getting convicted in the shooting back in 2001 and all these other things. And now we're going to talk about Clive Davis here and just how corrupt the music industry is. And speaking of the Mann Act, Chuck Berry, one of the other great founders of rock and roll, this money machine, he was convicted of the Mann Act too. And he was charged with it several times. He was convicted of taking a Native American girl from maybe New Mexico up to St. Louis, and she lived there for a while. She was 14. That's a whole big long story. He did a couple years in the feds for that. And it's funny who gets a pass and who doesn't. It may depend on what you do. Chuck Berry always was popular. Chuck Berry, if you don't know your history of music, listen to some Chuck Berry songs. He went to prison for the Mann Act. So you have a person considered to be Little Richard, G-A-Y, was considered deviant. You got Chuck Berry, who went to prison for a Mann Act, who, when he was older, when he was like 60-some years old, he had a restaurant in St. Louis. He had to pay out $1.2 million. I don't know why they didn't send him to prison. He had secret recordings in a women's bathroom. He had thousands of hours of women undressing and using the bathroom. He paid out a bunch of money for that. And then our other big rock and roll founding father of making money, Elvis Presley. Now, Elvis has his own issues, but I thought something interesting, more to the point of the corruption behind the scenes in the organized crime and the predators in management. Elvis's manager was a guy named Colonel Tom Parker. Well, he wasn't no colonel. Well, he was a colonel like Colonel Sanders, like he just recalling himself colonel, I guess. Tom Parker wasn't his name. He had a Dutch, like Jan Verwoekenjaken or one of those type of names. And he fled the Netherlands, possibly to avoid murder charges when he was about 20. Because the little town he left from, like the day he left with no passport, he snuck onto a U.S. ship. A woman was killed and has never been solved. Quite a coincidence. But anyways, he gets to the U.S. He joins the army, goes to World War II, re-enlists, then gets out. He's working in carnivals or something, notorious for cheating people, and at some point he finds Elvis. But when Elvis died, Colonel Tom Parker, and when Elvis died, Colonel Parker had, well, first of all, let me tell you this. He had a deal. You think they rip artists off now. He had a 50% commission. He was 50-50 with Elvis. Plus, he stole from him. At the time of Elvis Presley's death, in 1977 or whatever it was, he owed the manager, in inflation-adjusted dollars, the equivalent of $124 million to the Las Vegas Hilton. That's how much money Elvis's manager was in debt to the casino. If you remember, Elvis worked, his last years was mostly in the casinos. It was probably just to pay off the running tab of his manager. Elvis, for as big of a star as he is, he only performed outside the United States 3 times. And they were all in Canada. And Colonel Tom never went. Colonel Tom never became a U.S. citizen. He didn't want to go to the passport office or none of that. So our biggest, the rock icon Elvis seems to have had a pretty dark manager, worse than Suge Knight, owed to Hilton $124 million. Well, maybe not worse than Suge Knight, but pretty bad. And was showed up at Elvis's funeral. Like some people think Colonel Tom, kind of precipitated Elvis dying, R.I.P. the King, from Tupelo, Mississippi. He showed up at Elvis's funeral, got the father to sign over his life rights. He knew Elvis, he didn't have to split the money no more. He was getting it all, and Elvis got more popular after death. I think that Elvis was the first celebrity that got real popular in death. I think Elvis fever isn't what it used to be, but like when I was a kid, Elvis was like he was like white Tupac, like amongst the low-end whites, he was like how Tupac is, like Elvis t-shirts and Elvis conspiracies, Elvis sightings, Elvis. It seems to be over with to some degree, I don't know, but I don't move in Elvis-loving circles.
Davis almost single-handedly made CBS Records the leader in the rock revolution, generated substantial profits for the company. In the process, Clive Davis became the most powerful man in the music business. So it was a bombshell when in May of last year, CBS fired Clive Davis, charging that he had misused large amounts of company money.
Clive Davis running, these empires of highly respected and protected by his peers on the black side of the music industry, as you can see from this clip.
This was a convention of black record industry figures 3 months after Davis was fired.
We, as an organization, will never be intimidated. And we will not react to charges and allegations. And ladies and gentlemen, your record executive of the year is Mr. Clive Davis.
So they specifically were saying this is when Davis was going through his problems in the mid-'70s. We don't care. You're still man of the year. I'm sure he put a lot of money in a lot of people's pockets. But let's go back to why Diddy was charged theoretically with the RICO, racketeer influence corrupt organization. If you're using the business that you're ahead of to do stuff, probably they weren't so RICO happy. Well, they weren't RICO happy at all back in the 70s. They barely did it on the mob.
Winshaw said the $500,000 in Payola went for bribes to black radio stations and that these funds were concealed in the promotion budget of CBS Records. But our sources say that federal investigators are still checking his activities while he was at CBS Records.
Clive Davis might have got a RICO back then because Clive Davis, in this case, we're saying it all started with that big, huge heroin investigation. So in 1973, the feds hit all the big Italians in New York. There was like 10 different indictments of different groups of people. They did all at once.
None of these people are interested in the music as music. They're interested in the box office.
Rock impresario Bill Graham.
I'm telling you that rock and roll basically is no different than IBM, Xerox, Sara Lee, Chevrolet. Supply and demand. It's the same business.
There's a music psychologist, he's someone that was analyzing music and society back then, talking about, this is back in the 70s. He ain't talking about having an iPod. So the things we complain about in pop music now, of which rap is, just the same songs over and over. They force you to like something. You open TikTok. I remember it was a couple years ago, them 2 girls on TikTok running, hello, Christ, I'm about to sin again. Oh, my God. They forced that down. At least my algorithm forced it down my throat. And where are those girls now? And shout out to them. I hope they're doing well. But, like, they were trying to push them as, like, some type of big thing. And the video was catchy, the short, but it was really the clever part was them running and whatever the technique the cameraman picked up. And they put a bunch of money into it.
The story begins with Pat Falcone, convicted heroin smuggler with ties to a large New York mafia family. Falcone is now serving a 10-year sentence for drug trafficking. At the time of his arrest, Falcone was co-manager of two singers who then recorded on a CBS Records label. Although Falcone was never employed by CBS Records, it was the association between the convicted heroin smuggler and David Winshaw, the CBS Records executive, that triggered the nationwide investigation of the record industry by the Newark grand jury. Sources at CBS Records say that for more than 4 years, Falcone was a frequent visitor to Winshaw's office at CBS headquarters in New York.
And in all these investigations, there was this Pasquale guy that was part of one of these heroin operations, and he was, why is this guy, he was listed as Sly Stone's manager and another big act. They both, Sly Stone and the other big act, were like, we don't even know who this guy is. He's not our manager. But he was listed on the CBS roster as their manager, as you see from this Payola documentary made in 1974 by NBC or whatever, back when networks actually made good stuff. Thankfully, thanks to Hezekiah News and others, I can make these stories nowadays, and we can look at the past and see how similar the past is to the present. But of course, you guys know, because you've read your Old Testament, and you know that there's nothing new under the sun. I wouldn't call myself a Christian per se, but realistically, if you take in the lessons of the Bible, you will understand pretty much anything you're going to cross paths with in this life as far as your own tribulations and what other people do to you, because there ain't nothing new under the sun. Humans do the same stuff.
Singer Smith's life was threatened by West Coast mobsters in a dispute over a gambling debt. Smith reportedly turned to David Winshaw at CBS Records for help. Winshaw in turn called Pat Falcone. Federal investigators say Falcone passed the problem through an intermediary to one of the most powerful mafia chiefs in the United States, Anthony Fat Tony Salerno, boss of enormous gambling and loan shark operations in New York and Florida. Salerno is said to have used his vast influence to end the death threat against Smith. Pat Falcone, the original contact with the mob, later became O.C. Smith's co-manager. Our investigation has found that federal agents have been checking reports of other possible connections between mafioso Salerno and people at CBS Records.
He was one of the guys that was protecting me against this threat on the telephone. You know, the chaps that threatened to shoot me on stage were the reason that we had this chap Falcone.
Sources close to the federal investigation tell us that Falcone and another New York area mob figure provided what was called protection for CBS recording artists on several occasions. An independent record producer. Once again, he asked for his own safety that his identity remain secret.
I know that the mafia, both the black mafia and also the white mafia, they are intimidating a lot of the super rock stars. They are threatening, if he's a musician, they're threatening to break his playing hand. And if he's a vocalist, they're threatening to slit his throat. And they in turn, they are asking, and they're getting 25% of the artist's fee in kickbacks.
There is a charge that one record company, Roulette, had some partners who were members of the mob. Here is Gerald Zelmanowitz, who handled large-scale mafia finances. He's testifying before Senator Henry Jackson's investigative subcommittee last year.
Does Angelo DiCarlo or any other organized crime figure have any interest, to your knowledge, in any recording companies?
Roulette Records, Senator.
Roulette Records?
Yes, sir.
And where is that company headquartered?
In New York City. Its principal is Morris Levy. Mr. DiCarlo had that in conjunction with Thomas Eboli, E-B-O-L-I. He's now dead, sir. And his name was Thomas Ryan, as he was called.
Eboli, or Ryan, was a top mafia boss, second in command in one of the most powerful crime families in the country, until he was shot to death on a New York street. Angelo Gyp DiCarlo was a New Jersey mafia boss until he died of cancer. Morris Levy, president of Roulette Records, denies Roulette has or ever had any mafia partners. But Levy does admit partnership with former mafia chief Eboli.
So back in the 70s, it was, well, started in the 50s, there was something called the Payola scandal. There were congressional hearings, people, what DJs did prison time. And here in the 70s, they called it Payola again and drugola, because there was a lot of drugs being given to these artists. Now, if you're wondering why paying people to play a record or something like that is a RICO or would be even a crime, you're interfering with interstate commerce, you're interfering with fair trade. Because if I make a record and I think that I'm presenting it to radio stations and they're determining to play it on whether they just like it or their listeners are requesting it, but Suge Knight or Diddy or Clive Davis comes along and pays them, don't play Al Prophet's record, play ours, you're interfering with the consumers' a right to choose what products they want. You're interfering with fair trade. So it's in the same kind of category as like the Hobbs Act violations that are in Big U's case, where you're sticking up businesses as interfering with interstate commerce. You don't want to interfere with interstate commerce or fair trade. Something you might not even think is a big deal, like paying a DJ to play your record, could make you RICO eligible. Now you know. So this was a big deal back then. As you can see with these numbers, I want you, any numbers you hear in this documentary, in terms of dollars, multiply by about 8. So you're $2 billion in profit, $16 billion in profit, or $20 billion in profit in a year. That's in profit. And so this was an industry, and the entertainment industry, I guess my point of this is deviants and predators. And I was going to do a thing about, if you didn't know, the public, I don't know what term to use, men being with men and women being with men in public is actually tied with the mafia, with organized crime, because they owned all those bars around the country. It's 1950, it's 1960, it's 1975. You are a man and you want to go dance with a man and drink at a bar. 9 out of 10 organized crime owns the bar. Why? Well, they're into vice. They're into the rackets. They're into providing things that, they provide things that are all the way bad and illegal, like heroin, but also you want to gamble, you want to dance with a man, we got the place for you, but the drinks are going to be double the price and half the strength, and you're going to pay to get in. And we're going to run a little blackmail ring on the side. There was a big blackmail ring called the Chickens and the Bulls, where they would get these young hustlers, as they were known. I don't know how the word hustler got turned into everybody wants to be a hustler. Hustler used to mean you were a man who hustled men. But so they would get these young male hustlers and prominent men, including, there was a Navy admiral came into one of these bars that the mafia owned and fell in with one of these young men, and they get them back to a hotel room or whatever. And in the bull, that's slang for police officer, they got, there was a famous pro wrestler that was part of it, and he had a bunch of chickens, and he would come in and be the bull and say, because this was illegal to be man-on-man activities was illegal. The police, you want to go downtown? Do you want to pay some money? And they rob them, blackmail them. An admiral committed suicide. A senator was caught up. It was a big thing nationwide. And I actually found some old footage from the 70s on New York at like a GAY cable television show. And the wrestler, the Skull was his name, is being interviewed. But we'll save that for another one. Today we're focused on music and Clive Davis, Diddy, and all the deviant sexual activities that have always gone on, and The D-Rugs came in strong in this 1970s thing. So literally you have a serious mafia guy who's able to get with Fat Tony Salerno, one of the most powerful mafia chieftains, one of the biggest money makers, let's say, because he had heavy control on the numbers in not just Black Harlem, but with the Cuban mafia in New York and down in Florida. And he was out of where? East Harlem, Palmer Boy Socials Club, the Pleasant Avenue crew. So Pleasant Avenue is a little short street all the way on the east side of Harlem. It only runs a few blocks. It's like 116th Street. 116th Street on the west side. Shout out to Cavario. That's where his family was from there, from 116th and 8th. 116th Street is the heroin artery of America. It was. And the heroin business going around and being set up is what laid the groundwork for all the other drug businesses to come. So where Fat Tony Salerno's club was there around Pleasant Avenue, East 116th, is ground zero for the drug business in America, truly. And that was his stomping ground. So he had not just a stomping ground, that's where his club was at when he was indicted in the Mafia Commission trial in the mid-'80s. It was still Italian men sitting out in lawn chairs on Pleasant Avenue in East Harlem in the mid-'80s. And in fact, all through the 70s into the early 80s, mind you, I mean, this is hard, and it's all black, a few blocks away. It's called Spanish Harlem. This is high crime, rough area. And these couple blocks is all Italians sitting out in lawn chairs, and you can pull up, I got 50,000. I need a brick of heroin. Boom. I need to rent 2 machine guns. Boom. I need to borrow 100 grand. We're going to bring you 110 grand back tomorrow. This is what was going on. Pleasant Avenue. So one of maybe like the most criminalized neighborhood that ever existed as far as dollar value, and it was the mafia. And in fact, one of the first New York mafia family, it's the 116th Street Mob. And they started around there, 1899 or something. Not the first mafia family in the country. That was down in Tampa Bay and New Orleans, believe it or not, because those cities' climates were so similar to southern Italy's. That's where the very first Sicilian and Neapolitans set their criminal stuff up. In New Orleans, all the way back in I think the 1889 or something, there was a thing where some Sicilians killed the sheriff of New Orleans, and then the townspeople stormed the jail and lynched like 9 Sicilians. Pretty crazy. So it's 140 years ago of extreme mafia activities in New Orleans and Tampa and stuff going on. And even in New York and Detroit, it's 120 years old. Think about that. And it hasn't gone away. And it certainly hasn't gone away in Italy. It's bigger than ever. The 'Ndrangheta and the Camorra, there's Camorra and 'Ndrangheta clans. They got 20 billion in assets estimated, just one group. But there's another story. I'll do another day. So take in all these clips I'm showing you from this documentary made in the 70s about Payola then, and Clive Davis and David Wineshaw, who was known, let's do a quote. David Wineshaw, 52, Vice President of Artist Relations, A&R, if you ever wondered what that means. Artist Relations. What the hell does that mean? So if you thought A&Rs were people that went out and discovered acts, I mean, they can, but they're artist relations. So what the hell is that? That's like a catch-all to have an employee that you want to pay with no specific, artist relations. Yeah, he works with the artists. So that's the job you could put anybody in and give them a classic organized crime, what they call a no-show or a make-work job. You got a big union, hey, I'm going to let you get the contract to build the new stadium downtown, but we need 10 no-show jobs. So I'm going to give you 10 names. You're going to issue checks for $1,200 a week to each of these 10 names. We break it down in the mafia. That's how we get our money. And it comes legally through through companies and businesses. And that's how they have so much money in the legal economy, unlike other groups of people that have not been able to infiltrate the legal world and be corrupt in unions and business practices and are stuck selling dope, which you can't. It's very hard, so you end up just blowing your money fast and having 50 Cent make a television show about you. Meanwhile, and listen, unlike Courtney Brown, I'm not going to say that most Italian and Jewish families that have money got it from organized crime, but more than a few did, and there's lots of stuff that's owned and was built up by mafia money all across America, all kind of stuff, restaurant chains, and I'm not going to say a lot of stuff because some of them, they're litigious, they'll sue you because it's not proven in court, but, all type of stuff. And to this very day, in neighborhoods in New York where there's pizza parlors and all that, many, not all, because I don't want to unfairly categorize anybody, but a lot of them pizza parlors, there's something in there. They're getting their cheese from somewhere or something. Imagine you got 25 cents off of every can of a big industrial sized can of tomatoes that got opened up in New York City. They get poured on a pizza. Just imagine that. How much money is that every day? Thousands a day of free money? Beats selling dope, beats robbing a bank. And the music industry was the ultimate cash cow because they had these jobs like artist relations or people like Clive Davis and Diddy. And what it's not just the money I can give you, we put you on the jet owned by, who owned Arista, Columbia or whatever it was, or Universal. If I'm Diddy, I have access to what Universal or whoever he's on, all their properties and stuff. So you kind of almost like, it's like being the president. And then if you're running an entertainment company that has a bunch of celebrities signed to it who are your, not quite employees, but I mean, if you're the head of a record label and you call up whoever, even if it's Michael Jackson, and say, can you be over here and meet this person or talk to this person on the phone or go to this person's birthday party or come to this party, they're going to do it at least some of the time. That's just part of artist relations. They're going to do stuff back for the label because they want to keep the label happy. And if you're somebody that can make celebrities show up, imagine the other favors you can get, and there's no record of it. And so a business particularly ripe for exploitation, and especially, as we know, who wants to be, which is half of America now, famous for no reason, just because people didn't grow up getting enough love and affection. That's why there's so many troubled people in the arts. Now, you may just be a person like me that has a skill that becomes something that's popular, and that's fine. There's people who can sing that nothing's wrong with their personal life. But, hear about opera singers and, jazz people that can play an instrument. I mean, some of them have problems, but in the pop music, everyone's a drama and a problem because a lot of them don't really have that much musical talent. It's like created. I was watching Ray Daniels' good podcast about the music industry, and he was breaking down. He said Ashanti is the most, what did he say? She had the cheat code from Irv that Irv liked her. And he broke down how all of her hits, or her first wave of hits, were just sort of like remakes of songs that had already been popular that they just maybe changed the tempo and the instruments, but she just kind of used the cadence and someone else wrote the lyrics. I mean, that's why rap was different. It was supposed to be you wrote your own lyrics. That's why rap was exciting for a long time when it was, hey, this isn't the corporatized rock music, because rock music was exciting, 50s, 60s, 70s. The music, the big money comes in the 70s. Now, the 80s, it's dry. That's why punk rock and disco arose in the late 70s, because in this exact period of this documentary, the mid-70s, this was the peak of the rock era. But it peaked out when you get to these Fleetwood Mac and Carole King and the different artists selling 12 million. Simon and Garfunkel, Bridge Over Troubled Water, generated of like $40 million. That one album, times that by like 8 or 9, that's like $350 million off an album that probably costs $50,000 to make. Now, they put marketing budget into it, but you can see how the music, it's a little smaller of an industry than movies, because movies require a lot of capital. It takes money to make movies. Big musical acts can generate massive amounts of money with much less expenditure. It's almost like infinite. If making a movie is like selling dope, you hit a home run, you quadruple your money. Music, you hit a home run, it's like robbing a bank. It's like, we put up $500,000 to make, $90 million. There's almost no cost relative to the profit. And there's so many places, organized crime or just shady people or managers can steal from the artists. You had the concerts, you got, you guys had all this stuff. Back then they were giving away records for people to sell. Shout out to my man Tom Gilardi. Older Italian gentleman, city of Metro Detroit, used to stock all the independent records, rap, whatever, and he would take my DVDs and put them in all the mom and pop record stores around in the city of Detroit and in the suburbs. Everybody knew Tom Gilardi or knows Tom, so he just shout out. He told us a story. Now, he was in the business for a long time. His buddy was managing, I won't say the rock band, but a big rock band in the 80s that was signed to Capitol Records. It was time to get the yearly royalties. He goes, and head of Capitol, or whoever the executive, I don't know if it was the head of Capitol, but whoever was in charge of that account, or that band, gives him a check. The manager looks at the check. He's like, oh no. I did my research. I found the plant where you've been pressing our vinyls. I know that we didn't sell 621,000 copies. We sold 1,053,000 or whatever. Because I went to the plant and I made them tell me. And the executive simply took that check back, put it in the drawer, and he already had a check for the right amount written and signed, and simply handed it to him. Hey, I just tried to cheat you out of a couple million, but you caught me, so here you go. That's the entertainment business. That's what you sign up for. That's worse than the streets. Sheesh. And entertainment attracts a lot of people. Look at Cassie. Let's go back to Diddy. Ultimately, what the jury seemed to decide and what the public seems to feel generally is, Diddy got what he paid for. Like, she signed up for that. She was in a relationship with him for 15 years, mind you. Right? She wasn't presenting her as, and Diddy, she was 19. Well, no, she was 32 or something, or 34 when she left him, or whatever. Like, they were together a long time. She did this a long time. The D-Rugs, like, you might give somebody D-Rugs for a while, but after so many years, like, they're on it on their own. Like, come on. So Cassie was someone that, sold her soul, so to speak, to the devil, so to speak. And, she had her fun, and she got paid, but she had to do a public spectacle, and people look at a video of someone number one in her mizalf. But, you know, she got to go to the Met Gala and wear a fancy outfit, which is shockingly, if you speak to a lot of these women that are involved in various things, focus around their physical attractiveness, whether it's the entertainment business or another business, they'll do anything. It's for the attention. It's to feel special. It ain't the money. In fact, a lot of these girls trying to work you out of money. I mean, if you're dealing with drug addict, streetwalker or something, they may have hungry kids or hungry habits. But like just these beggar girls that now populate social media, they may not need no money. It's that if someone gives them some, it makes them feel important because, I mean, our culture has devolved to where all that counts is how much money you got. Yeah, but he got the bag. Think about it next time you have highly weird dreams. You want to be in the industry. That's why, I mean, the only thing music I like at least the most street kind of music is you're just hearing what somebody made on their own and put out. Right? You riding around listening to some Detroit rappers. It's just what they made and put out. You can like it or like it not. There's no bisexual godfather backing them. Right? That's not the reason their song is getting played on TikTok. It's on TikTok because people liked it and put it up. They don't even have marketing half the time. The fans got to market it themselves. So people still are always going to respond to what's bubbling from the ground because it resonates because it's real. But as soon as things get into the entertainment pipeline, it gets weird. For those of you that don't know, I did 100 or some music videos way back, 04, 5, 6. I was early with it. And so these would be guys that had the money to make a video. They were cheap. But the few times, so I never had any problem with all street got no problem. Always get paid, no arguments, nothing weird happening. Like I've no anecdotes about really anything bad with any street people. But the few times did something with, or just there were people around that was like, oh, this is so-and-so and he's signed or he sings. It was not always, but just weird vibes often. Not always, but sometimes. Now, what did the vibes mean? Well, I don't know, because no one ever cuts into me, has ever cut into me. And I'll leave you with this. When you accidentally go into the GAY bar, they're supposed to come up to you within about 30 seconds and say, you sure you know where you're at? And you say, oh, my bad, and you leave. Because if they don't tell you that, then they see something in you might not see in yourself. So if they let you stay too long, take a long, hard look in the mirror when you get home. Al Prophet, Bizarre, Sexual, Music Morphia. Imagine though.
CKLW in the middle of 54 minutes of hit music this hour. 8:30 with Truckin' Teddy on the Big 8.